I stood in the back office of Thompson's Emporium, the keys still warm from my father's hand, and for one perfect moment, I believed everything my parents had ever told me. "Laura, you're the only one we can trust with this," Dad said, his voice thick with what I thought was pride. Mom hugged me so tight I could smell her rose perfume, the same one she'd worn since I was little. "It's your legacy now, sweetheart. We're finally retiring to Florida, and we know you'll make us proud." I was 32, the responsible daughter who had never left our quiet hometown. While my younger brother, Mark, chased dreams in California, I had stayed behind, working weekends in the store since I was 15. The Emporium wasn't fancy, just 3 small convenience stores that sold everything from bread to light bulbs, but it was our family's heartbeat. I had given up art school for it, given up late nights and silly dreams, because my parents always said family comes first, and I believed them. That afternoon, they signed the papers and handed me the business like it was a gift wrapped in love. I signed everything without reading every line. Why would I? These were the people who raised me, who cheered at my school plays, who told me I was their rock. By evening, they were gone, suitcases rolling toward the airport, waving from the car with tears in their eyes. Or so I thought. The first week felt like a dream. I stayed until midnight organizing shelves, calling suppliers, promising the staff that things would get better. But by the second week, the cracks appeared. Invoices from 6 months ago sat unpaid. The bank account was bleeding red. Employees started quitting, saying they hadn't seen a full paycheck in weeks. I worked 18-hour days, sleeping on the couch in the office, living on coffee and hope. "It's just a rough patch," I told myself every night. Mom and Dad must not have realized how bad it had gotten. One rainy Tuesday, while sorting through the old filing cabinet to find tax records, my fingers brushed against a thick envelope marked Family Trust, Private. The paper was yellowed, dated 5 years earlier, long before they ever mentioned retiring. My heart gave a strange little flutter, but I told myself it was nothing. I slipped it into my bag, promising I'd look later when I wasn't so exhausted. That night, alone in my tiny apartment above the main store, I opened it under the lamp. The first page made my stomach drop. It wasn't a simple transfer of the business to me. It was a carefully worded legal document that placed every debt, every loan, every risk squarely on my shoulders while protecting a separate account in my parents' and brothers' names. Hidden clauses, offshore references, numbers that didn't match anything I had seen in the day-to-day books. My hands started shaking so hard the pages rattled. I whispered to the empty room, "What is this?" Tears blurred the words, but I kept reading, my chest tightening with every line. This wasn't a mistake. This was planned. I called my mother that same night, voice trembling. "Mom, I found some old trust papers. I don't understand." She laughed softly, the way she used to when I was little and worried about silly things. "Oh, honey, don't stress yourself. We took care of everything. Just focus on the store." Then she changed the subject to the Florida weather. I hung up feeling small and foolish, but something inside me had already cracked. That night, I cried until my eyes burned, the same way I had cried at 16 when they told me art school wasn't practical. Only this time, the pain was deeper, because this time it felt like they had looked me in the eye and chosen to break me. I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor surrounded by papers, the rain tapping against the window like it was trying to warn me. The girl who had always put family first was starting to wonder if family had ever really put her first. And those trust papers, they were only the beginning. The next few months destroyed the last pieces of the girl I used to be. I poured everything into the Emporium, my savings, my health, my hope.
I begged suppliers for extensions, worked the cash register myself when staff walked out, and smiled through it all, because the town still saw me as good old Laura Thompson, carrying on the family name. Inside, I was shattered. Every night, I went deeper into the financial records. What I found made my stomach turn. Over the last 7 years, my parents had quietly moved almost $2 million out of the business into private accounts that were never listed in the store's books. Wire transfers labeled as consulting fees to my brother's tech startup in California. Luxury vacations charged to the company credit card while they told me we were cutting back. The dying business wasn't dying by accident, it had been drained on purpose. I drove to the city one weekend and met with an old friend who was now a forensic accountant. She looked at the trust papers and the ledgers, and her face went pale. "Laura, this wasn't sloppy bookkeeping, this was intentional. They structured everything so you would inherit the shell while they kept the good parts for themselves and Mark." She showed me emails they had deleted from the company server, where my father wrote, "Laura will handle it. She always does. Just make sure the trust protects us." I sat in her office and cried like a child. The woman who had baked me birthday cakes, the man who taught me to ride a bike, had looked at their loyal daughter and decided I was the perfect person to carry their failure. All those years of "we're so proud of you" were just preparation for this moment. I confronted them over video call, the trust papers spread across my kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene. My voice cracked when I asked, "How could you do this to me?" Mom's face stayed calm, almost pitying. "Sweetheart, you're being dramatic. We gave you a business. Most parents don't do that." Dad added, "If you can't handle it, maybe you should have said something earlier. We trusted you to step up." Trusted me. The words burned. I had trusted them with my entire life. The betrayal carved something out of me. I stopped sleeping. My hands shook when I counted the register. I lost weight until my clothes hung loose. One night, I stood in the empty store after closing, staring at the shelves I had stocked with my own hands, and I whispered, "I am not this person they made me. I am more than their mistake." That was the first time I felt something besides pain, something sharp and quiet and strong. I hired a lawyer the next morning, not for revenge yet, but for truth. We started digging. Every new discovery broke me a little more, but each one also stitched me back together with steel. I found my brother had known for years. He had laughed about it in texts to my parents. "Let Laura play storekeeper while we enjoy the real money." The golden child had helped plan my cage. I stopped calling them Mom and Dad in my head. I started calling them by their names, Richard and Helen, because the titles no longer fit. The girl who once would have done anything to make them proud was gone. In her place stood a woman who was learning, slowly and painfully, that love should never cost you your future. By the end of that year, I had stopped crying every night. The pain was still there, but it had hardened into focus. I knew what they had done. I knew how deep the betrayal went, and I knew I was no longer the person they had counted on to quietly disappear under the weight of their lies. The day I walked into the courtroom, I was no longer the broken daughter they had left behind. I was calm, dressed in the black suit I had bought with the last of my savings, carrying a binder thick with proof. My lawyer had turned the trust papers, the deleted emails, the secret accounts, and the forensic audit into a case that could not be ignored. Embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty, fraudulent conveyance. The words sounded cold and legal, but to me they meant one thing. The truth was finally going to speak. Richard and Helen sat across the aisle looking smaller than I remembered. My brother Mark flew in and refused to meet my eyes. The judge listened as my lawyer laid everything bare. I took the stand once. My voice didn't shake. I simply told the court what it felt like to be handed a dying business by the two people who were supposed to protect me. When I finished, the silence in the room was heavier than any scream. The ruling came 3 months later. The court ordered them to repay every dollar they had taken, over $2 million plus interest. The separate trust they had hidden behind was dissolved. The Florida house they had bought with company money was placed under lien. Mark's startup lost its secret funding and collapsed within weeks. The town newspaper ran the story on the front page. People who had known our family for decades stopped waving when Richard and Helen came back to settle their affairs. They tried to call me,
Left voicemails that started with anger and ended with pleading. I never answered. I chose not to destroy them completely. I could have pushed for criminal charges, but I didn't. Instead, I let the judgment stand as the mirror they would have to look into for the rest of their lives. Sometimes the deepest cut is simply forcing someone to see what they really are. With the money that was returned, I paid off the worst of the debts and relaunched the Emporium as something new, smaller, honest, and mine. I changed the name to Laura's Corner and turned one of the stores into a little cafe where local artists could display their work. The first time a customer told me the coffee tasted like hope, I cried in the back room, not from sadness this time, but from the quiet joy of building something that no one could take away. My parents tried one last time to reach me. They showed up at the store on a quiet Tuesday, looking older and smaller. Helen's hands trembled when she tried to hug me. "We never meant for it to go this far," she whispered. I stepped back gently. "You meant every single line in those trust papers," I said softly. "And I meant every day I fought to survive what you did." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. They left without another word. Today, I wake up in the same small apartment, but it feels different. The weight is gone. I have friends who stayed through the worst of it, a business that is growing slowly but honestly, and a heart that finally knows its own worth. I even started painting again, late at night, just for me. If there is one thing I want you to remember from my story, it's this: blood does not make someone family. Trust does. When the people who are supposed to love you choose to break that trust, the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to stay broken. You don't have to become cruel like them. You simply have to become unbreakable for yourself. I lost the parents I thought I had, but I found the woman I was always meant to be. And that, in the end, is the only legacy worth keeping. If you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Si les gusta el video, suscríbanse al canal.